Hi everyone, Steven here. So you're setting up a vSAN storage policy and you get to this screen here and you're wondering, what the heck does this number of disk stripes per object means? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode. So stick around and we'll also take a look at underneath the covers what's going on. See you in a bit. Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around. So what we're going to do is, if you watch my previous video, I talked about vSAN storage policies, and I skipped over this setting on number of stripes, disk stripes for the storage object. And this is what we call striping. So we're going to take a look at that. I'll talk about kind of how it was before and then what it's like right now. So stick around for that. Also, we'll be demoing it as well. So it's not just lecture. I always like to throw this out at this point. Thank you everybody for subscribing to the channel. Channel's growing. I really like that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button. It's free. It does help me out quite a bit. Also, if you want to help out the channel, I do have super thanks enabled now. So enough of that. Let's jump right into it. Let's get me to my iPad and my webcam here. All right. So this is that setting that we're talking about here, right? Number of disk stripes. So first of all, let's talk about, let's talk about it when we talk about failure to tolerate equals 1. In other words, we're mirroring, okay? So, so this is what failure to tolerate equals 1, and you're doing mirroring. Again, just kind of a quick review. You got your VM, it's an object. So your virtual disk, let's say it's an object. Let's say it's 100 gig in size. All right, so we're going to take that object and break it down into components. So we're going to stripe that across. There's component 1, component 2, then we have a witness component as well. You'll notice this component 1 is 100 gig in size, and same thing with this one, because these are mirrors, okay? And the witness is there as a tiebreaker in case one fails. You know, it provides quorum for us, okay? You'll notice in my picture, I'm talking about the original storage architecture here. So in my picture, you'll notice I got cache disks, and I also have a disk groups as well. In my picture, I'm showing you 3 servers, server 1, server 2, and server 3. Each server has, 8 hard drives inside them. 2 of them are cache. So the disk group 1 here, disk group 1 and disk group 2 for this server. Disk group 1 and disk group 2 for this server, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we see this is striped, or sorry, we'll say it's striped across the host. Now, if I go and I set the settings to 2, what's going to happen? So when we look at this, failure to tolerate equals 1, and we're mirroring, and we're doing striping of 2. That means I'm going to take this original object, this original component of this object, which in my case here is 100 gig in size. I'm going to split it in half because I want to have 2 stripes, right? If I wanted 3 stripes, I'd split it into 3. It'd be like 33.33 or something like that, or 4 or whatever, okay? But we're just going to do 2. So it's going to take this and split it into 2, and that's what it's done. It's taken it, split it into 2, so these are now 50 gigs each. Again, you'll see component 2 over here. Again, it's been split into 2, and the witness still stays the same. Now this here, in this example I'm talking about, is vSAN 6 to vSAN 7, okay? What we notice in this example is this second component, I called it component prime, whatever, right, is on the same disk group, okay? It could have put it over here, let's say, or over here, right? It could have put it on a different disk group, but it didn't. So this version 6 to 7, it potentially puts it onto the same disk group. What's the bad thing about this? Well, the bad thing about it is now, again, if this is a hybrid environment, so these are all these are all spindle disks. 70% of the reads go through the cache, the solid state up here, and 30% of the writes go here. So you're not really gaining any performance by splitting these across, right? If this component here was sitting here, potentially now it's using this cache device. So now you're actually striping stuff across different disk groups, and you're improving your performance potentially. Okay, notice I'm going to be very careful with this performance statement, right? But in this example here with the older firmware, the older version, you know, these components all sit behind the same cache, and you're really not going to get any benefit from it potentially. When we look at vSAN 7 update 1 and greater, so if you're running, like I'm running version 8 here, it will actually create those components across different disk groups. And the advantage here now is I'm utilizing different cache. Okay, so this has the potential to increase my performance. Remember, in an all-flash configuration, the cache is used for 100% writes. Okay, so now if I'm writing out to this one big, I'm going to call it one big chunk that's split into two components, it potentially is going to write to here and to write to here. I might get some performance improvement there, right? Whereas before, I'm not going to get any benefit there. If this was a hybrid environment, 70% reads go through the cache. Now I have the potential of doing some reads here, splitting the reads across the two different caches here, right? Again, that has the potential of giving me some better in performance. Again, notice I'm being very careful with the potential to give you better performance. The only time this is really going to help you out is if this component down here is the bottleneck. So let's go back to my original config, right? If I go back to my original config and I find that this device has a hard time keeping up with requests, then at that point I may want to say, all right, let's do striping, if that makes sense, okay? But so you got to be very careful here. If this component is not a bottleneck, then doing a stripe is not, you're wasting your time, to be honest with you, right? So again, we see in the old version, it would dump it onto the same disk group, right? Obviously, too, if you have a very small environment, you only got one disk group, like I have in my lab environment, there isn't a second disk group. Putting striping is probably not going to make much sense, to be honest with you. So you want to have multiple disk groups to get bigger bang for your buck. So this is, again, failure to tolerate equals 1, and we're striping of 2, okay? So if I had striping of 3, there'd be another component. Maybe I had another disk group, so on and so forth. So that's RAID 1. Let's take a look at that one real quick. So let's go into here. So let's go into, let's go into policies and profiles. And you'll see basically, let's create a new one. Let's create one called RAID 1 stripe equals 2. How about that? Okay. And then I'm going to say, here's my vSAN storage. Again, it's going to be failure to tolerate 1, RAID 1. It sounds good. Rules over here, I don't really care so much about this stuff. And I talked about all those in my other video. We're going to go into here and we're going to set our number of stripes to 2. Notice you can go all the way up to 12. Again, don't blindly just, oh, let's set it up to 12, right? You're potentially wasting your time, right? So I'm going to put it to 2. I'm going to go next. There's the vSAN. Okay, great. There's my policy. Let's go to my VM over here. So let's go back into inventory. And I've got Web 1 right now. And let me just go into here under, again, under monitor, select your VM, under monitor, under vSAN, physical disk placement. You'll see I have my hard disk, which is RAID 1. I have the virtual machine swap object because the VM's turned on, RAID 1. And I get the VM's home directory. Think of that as the config, RAID 1. And you see all these things are made up of different components. I'm doing RAID 1, so component, witness. Let's just look at the disk. The hard disk here, component, and witness. And we see that one component's on host 1, another's on host 2, and the other one's on host 4. Okay? Let's take and, oh, by the way, and if I just go into here, right click, let's right click on this and go into VM policies, edit policies. What policy is it set for? It's set for the default storage policy. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that for a second. Let's go into this thing called the Ruby vSphere console, or RVC. So I'm going to putty into my vCenter server. Okay, where are you? Right there. Here's my vCenter server, and I'm going to log in as root. Shoot. Okay, let me just change this so we can see it a little bit better, folks. Change settings. Let's go to the appearance. Let's go to the font size to 12 this time. Then we'll hang on. I always like to change my background colors for those of you that are watching the channel. Default background. Let's modify that. Maybe that's a bit too, yeah, okay, whatever. And we apply it. There we go. Let's go full screen on this. I might do a video on the Ruby vSphere console, but this was a tool that was extremely valuable, and you had to basically use this. But now, a lot of times today, a lot of the stuff is going to the GUI, but it's still a good tool to use. So I've SSH'd into my vCenter server. I'm just going to type in shell, and then I'm going to type in the RVC. I'm going to log into that. So RVC administrator at vSphere.local at local host. I spelled that wrong. Local host. Can't type today. There we go. And it's going to ask me for my password. And I always get this thing coming up here about this gem has been renamed to Opti, whatever. Okay, you just ignore that. Now, this is not that intuitive, to be honest with you. These are sort of like directories, and if you're familiar with Linux, you can move up and down like your directory trees. Same thing in Windows, right? But you don't type in dir, you type in ls for list, right? So you'll see I got a directory 0. You see I got this thing called 0/ and then I got a 1, and then localhost. Think of these as directories. So I'm going to change directory cd, and I can type in localhost. I'm now in that directory. Let me go back up. That's what cd dot is. If I do an ls again, I can type in cd1, and it's the same thing. Notice my prompt. And I can do an ls, and I can actually see, oh, there's my data center. So I'll go cd sa. I can hit tab to autocomplete. Going into the data center, CD, and I can actually go in and look at various information. If I click into computers, CD1 for computers, if I do ls, you see my listings here. Cluster 1, you'll see there's host 5 here. If I go into the cluster CD0, I'm into the cluster. If I do an ls, I see various stuff there, like resources and memory and stuff like that. So I can look at stuff if I want to. Let's look at a VM, CD4 for the VMs. If I do an ls there, let me actually go back to the top. I'm going to hit Control L. I'm back at the top now. Now I'm going to type in ls. And you see there's my VM, number 2, T1-Web01, whatever, okay? That VM has about 750 gig disk, if I remember, or 750 meg disk, sorry. Now, there's some commands you could run. There's vSAN, various commands. If I hit tab, so I hit tab twice, you'll see all the different commands that you can actually type in, like disk info and stuff like this. I'm not going to go through and show you all this. I'm actually going to look at this one here, vSAN VM object underscore info. I want to look at the objects on this VM. So I'll type in vSAN underscore or vSAN VM underscore object info, and then if I just hit enter, it comes back and says I'm missing something. I'm missing an argument, VMs. Well, that would be number 2, right? So object number 2, and it's fetching the information, and it gives you a lot more detailed information about what's going on with that VM. So this is the VM, okay, and you'll see I've got first of all, this is the VMX of the VM, and here's the components that make up that. That's that home. Then you'll see over here the VMDK, and here's the components that make up the VMDK. Then the swap and the components that make it up. So let's just look at the VMDK, right? So the VMDK, it's RAID 1 because I got failure to tolerate equals 1. That's the vSAN default. I got one component here. It's running on host 4, and it's roughly about 0.7 gig in size. I got another component running on host 1 and about 0.7 gig in size, about 700 meg. And then I got my witness component running on host 2. So I could see the components and I could see the states. They're currently active. I'll probably do a troubleshooting video separate where we're doing rebuilds and whatnot later on. But anyways, so I can actually view the objects here, which is great. And I can kind of do the same thing within the GUI, but I'm getting a lot more information over here if I want to, right? Let's go back in. Let's change that policy now. So I'm going to right click on the VM and I'm going to edit settings. Let's go to, actually, you know what? I could have done it at the hard disk if I wanted to. Change it there, right? But that would just do the hard drive. Let's do it this way. Let's right click on the VM. let's go to, where are you? VM policies, edit storage policies. And then I could do it on a per disk basis if I want to. I've already demoed this in previous videos, but I'm going to change the policy now to RAID 1 stripe 2. And I'll say OK. I did do a stripe 2 on that. Notice it's reconfiguring. Let's click on the cluster real fast. Let's go to monitoring. Let's go all the way down to resyncing objects under vSAN. So you see it's actually resyncing. It's actually rebuilding everything. Remember I said we're going to split this chunk into 2 chunks now, right? Or one component into 2 components. That's kind of what it's doing right now. So just let it finish. There we go. It's finished. So let's look back at the VM, physical displacement. We now see, let's just look at the hard disk. It's RAID 0, so 2 components, right? RAID 0, again, another 2 components here. And then we do RAID 1 across those as well. Sorry. Yeah. So we got RAID 0 with these components. I got confused with this one picture here. You got RAID 0 right here and RAID 0 right here. And we're doing RAID 1 across those. So it's kind of like a RAID 10, okay? RAID 1 and 0. So let's look at the Ruby vSphere console here, right? Let's go back into here. And if I go, you'll see now, let's just look at the disk. Okay, the home and the swap stayed the same. It didn't change that. It only changed the data disk, which makes sense. That's the one that's important, right? So you'll see it's RAID 1, and then we got 2 components. So we took that, whatever, that 0.7 gig disk before it was, right? Where was it before? I think it was way up here somewhere. We can't see it. But it split it in half roughly, okay? And it made 2 components out of that. And it's RAID 0 in those. Then it made another 2 components. And it's RAID 0 in those. And then we're RAID 1, we're mirroring those 2 RAID 0s together, okay? So that's what it did underneath the covers for me. So that's kind of cool, right? Did it give me any better performance? Probably not, especially in my lab environment. So this is something you just don't want to play with, okay? Recommended settings from VMware is to leave that at 1. If you do want to change it and you think that you'll benefit from this, they say, maybe change it to 2 or whatever. But I would sit down and really analyze my environment first. I wouldn't do this at 9 o'clock Monday morning because you see you have to reconfigure and resync things. So that could be a performance impact. So if you're going to do this, you might want to do a backup of everything first, change it to whatever number, and then do some benchmarks and stuff like that. But generally speaking, leaving it at 1 is usually a good idea. Let's go back now. Let's talk about RAID 5. Again, this is the original storage architecture I'm talking about. So let's look at RAID 5. This is just RAID 5 with a striping of 1. So we're going to have our VM. It's a 100 gig VM, right? We're going to basically stripe it across. So you got a component, and another component. That would be, let's say, your parity over here. So we're striping stuff across, which is RAID 5. I talked about that. You'll notice, again, RAID 5 here, since this is a 100 gig VM, these will be 33 gigs in size each, okay? Because the cost of this is 1.33. All right, so whatever size you want, 1.33, that's the cost of it, okay? Essentially what you're doing is, let's say this is the parity over here. So you take whatever size disk is. If I got a 500 gig disk, I divide it by 3, okay? And that's basically what's going to happen. That's how big the parity is. So now let's do this. Let's put a striping on this. If I put a stripe of 2, this would be pre-8. So again, vSAN 6 to vSAN 7. If I do a stripe of 2, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to take that 33, split it in half. I'm going to take that one component, make 2 out of it. So we got component 1 and component 1 prime. Those are about 16.5 gig each, roughly. Okay, and I'm going to do the same here, and the same here, and the same here. So I'm splitting those up. Suppose if I set it to 3. Notice again, they're pretty much on the same disk group, right? So they could be on the different disk group, but it more than likely is going to land on the same disk group. So you're not really going to get a lot of benefit from this. Unless, of course, this component here is a major bottleneck, and this guy has an easy time keeping up with the other ones. Then you might get a performance improvement. Let's do a stripe of 3. What happens there? Well, we're going to take this original chunk and break it into 3s. So we see here, boom, that's a stripe of 3. Again, one of these could have landed over here. right? But I'm just kind of really emphasizing it could be on the same disk group. How about if we set it to 4? Again, what we're going to do is take this original chunk, chop it up into 4, and you kind of get, and you can go all the way up to 12, like I said, which is kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you, right? So this is what it would look like, vSAN 6 to vSAN 7. Not really that great. Now, one of the things when we think about RAID 5, technically, so with the original storage architecture, you needed 4 servers, okay? 4 servers. So technically, I took my data, my 100 gig data, and I'm striping it across. That's what I'm doing right now because it's a RAID 5 stripe, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4 components out of that. So technically speaking, I'm already striping. So what they did with vSAN 7.0 update 1 and higher is they said, okay, if you got RAID 5, again, the original storage architecture, and you set the striping anywhere between 1 to 4, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You're already doing 4. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to make any change. If you change it, the stripe, to anywhere between 5 to 8, at that point, it's going to do a stripe of 2. If you go anywhere from 9 to 12, it'll do a stripe of 3. Okay? So basically, just think to yourself, this is how I kind of remember it. Well, if I got anything between 1 to 4, I already got 4 components, so it's already striping 4. So I got to go higher than 4 to make it stripe more than that. So that's why when I go to 5 to 8, it adds in another stripe here. So this is actually a stripe width of 2. Well, technically speaking, 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm actually doing 8 stripes right here. So anything here, 8, and then if you do 9, you'll have 12 in total. Okay, you'll have another one. I don't have a picture of it here. So let's take a look at that right now. Whoops. Let's take a quick peek at that. So let's go to here, and let's go back in. Let's do the same VM. Let's go into here. Let's go into policies and profiles. Let's create one. We'll call it RAID 5-stripe equals 2. How about that? Okay. Next. For vSAN, we'll go next. We'll go into RAID 5 here. Yep, RAID 5. I got to go in here. I got to set it to all flash to get rid of those warnings. And we're going to go to a stripe width of 2. Okay? So remember I said anything between 1 and 4, it's not going to change anything. Actually, sorry, you know what? Forget about that. Let's just go to stripe width of 1. We go next. Because it's compatible, we go next and we go finish. All right? So there we go. Again, we got a stripe width of 1. Let's go into my inventory. Let's right click on the VM there. Let's go to VM policies, edit storage policies. Let's go to RAID 5 stripe 2. I know it's only stripe 1, okay? But let's say okay. And we wait. So it's got to resync everything. Actually, let's go back into the cluster. Let's look at, let's get rid of this so I get more space. It's probably already done by now. Resyncing objects. Let's refresh. Okay, it's still kind of resyncing here. Okay. Remember, I called it stripe 2, but I only set it to 1, right? Just to show you. There we go. Okay, it's done. Let's look at the VM. Physical displacement. We see RAID 5 here. Again, here's my hard disk. Again, you have the swap and you have the home directory, okay? So we now have basically 4 components for each of those. And it's RAID 5, okay? Let's look at my Ruby vSphere console here. She's not the one I want. Must have had one extra open. If I go into here, oops. You now see, here's my, let's clear the screen first. Okay, so you now see my VMX, okay? That's the home. Again, it's RAID 5. There's the 4 components. Here's my swap because the VM's turned on. It's RAID 5. Here's the 4 components. Let's more importantly look at the disk here. There's the disk, and we see our RAID 5, and we see our components. Again, we got one on host 2, one on host 1, one on host 3, another one on host 4, and everybody's active. Everybody's happy. Okay? Great. Let's go back in. Let's edit this profile. Policies and profiles. And where's that one here? RAID 5 stripe 2. Let's change it to stripe 2. Let's go next. Whatever next. 2. I'll say next. whatever, finished. And it's asking me, you're making a change to the policy. Do you want to update that changes to the VM right now, or do you want to do that later on? You're going to manually do it. I'm going to say do it right now. I'll go yes. And then if at this point, let's hopefully it doesn't make a liar out of me. Let's go to inventory, the cluster, refresh. Shouldn't be anything going on. There's nothing going on. If I go back to the VM, I look at physical displacement. If I refresh, there's nothing's changed. If I go to my Ruby vSphere console, we still see the disk, the hard drive, still just has 4 components. Okay, nothing's changed. I can go back in and change that stripe to 3. It would still do the same thing. Change it to 4. Nothing would happen, right? But let's change it to 5. Okay. So let's go to policies and profiles. Let's edit this, and let's go next. Here again, if I change it to 3, well, we got 4 stripes, so we're okay. If I change it to 4, well, we already have 4 stripes, so we got to go to 5 or higher. Right, so I'm going to pick 5. All right. If I pick 6, 7, or 8, it would do the exact same thing. Let's go next. Yes, I want to do this right now. And then let's go back into my inventory. Let's select the cluster. And you see it's syncing up right now. Okay. Again, this is a small VM. It's like only 750 megs. It's a little Linux machine I got that I play with in my NSX classes. Here we go. Give it a few seconds longer, right? So, but me saying, remember the RAID 5 has automatically got 4 stripes when you think about it. So as soon as I said I want to go to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, it says, oh, I now need to increase those number of stripes, okay? So it's the next thing it can do is can only go up to 8, multiples of 4. So 4, 8, 12, okay? There we go, it's finished. Let's go back in Web 1. You'll see, let's refresh this screen here. You'll see now we have a hard disk, 1, right? It's RAID 5. You got a RAID 0 component. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 RAID 0 components. Each RAID 0 component is made up of 2 components. Again, notice they're on the same servers here. Okay, let's look at the Ruby vSphere console. So this is what we looked like before. And they're roughly about 0.3 gig in size each, right? Roughly. Let's look at now. We see RAID 5. There's our RAID 0 made up of 2 components here. Again, this is roughly about, 0.1 gig now, roughly about half, right? There's another RAID 0 component over here, or another RAID 0 with 2 components, another RAID 0 with 2, and another RAID 0 with 2 components. So yeah, so that's what striping is, okay? Does it give you any benefit in performance? Again, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the capacity disk. Is it a bottleneck? Is your capacity disk being a bottleneck and the cache can keep up to it? Then maybe this might improve performance. Again, if you got multiple disk groups, this may help you out. If you only got a single disk group, you may not see any benefit whatsoever. But again, just like any other answer in performance, it depends. Okay? Okay, I think that's about it. But there's one more thing I want to show you, okay? So I just went through, we talked about striping. I showed you with RAID 1 and RAID 5. Again, potentially that could help you out with performance, potentially. Is there another time when vSAN might stripe components on an object automatically? And the answer is yes. The maximum size for a component is 255 gig. Anything larger than that, it's gonna stripe it. Let me show you. Let me right click on my cluster here, new virtual machine. We'll just call it whatever, VM1. VM1. Next. I'll pick my vSAN. I'm just gonna pick the default vSAN storage policy. Where are you? Default vSAN storage policy. Okay, nothing crazy. Next. Windows. I don't care. I'm gonna leave the memory small. And 1 processor. Now notice the hard drive is 90 gig. Let's make it 200 gig. It's 200 gig. I'm gonna go next. Finished. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna right click on this, and then yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like that. Okay. So when I click on this and I go configure, sorry, not configure. If I go monitor, And then if I go into physical displacement, you see I got my my hard drive, my RAID 1. There's my 2 components and my witness. There's my home, again, 2 components and a witness. So let's take a look at it inside the Ruby vSphere console. Let's minimize this, get this out of the way. Guess I had closed it or something. Let's go into my vCenter server here. Where are you? There's my NSX. There we go. Just going to log into it as root. Type in my password. And I'm just going to change the font and stuff so you can see it a little bit better. Change settings, appearance. All right, let's go to 14. Yeah, that's good enough. We'll just leave it at that. Let's go full screen. Let's type in shell. Let's run RVC administrator at vSphere and local at local host. Yep. Oh, shoot. Come on. Okay, so I'm just going to change it to my local host, my data center. Oops. Say data center. And then there should be one for VMs. And then if I do an ls, I see VM, my VM1 is number 2, right? So let's go back to the top. Let's type in vSAN.vm score object list, and it was, shoot, what was that number again? I forgot. Number 2 is what we want. Number 2, vSAN dot VM underscore object list, number 2. And we look at it, and we see we have our 2 RAID 1 components and a witness. Okay, that's our home. Okay, big deal about that. Here's the virtual disk. It's power off right now, so I don't see the swap. So I see 2 components. Okay, and I see my witness. All right, that's the RAID 1. Remember, I made it 200 gigs in size. Let's go back into vSphere. Let's right click on the VM, edit settings. Let's go to that virtual disk. It's 200 gig. I'm going to make it 300 gig. I'm going to say OK. And I'll give it a few seconds here. Just give it a few seconds to kind of catch up. All right. So if we go back in here now, this is what it looked like before. Here's my virtual disk, my 2 RAID 1 components, and my witness. All right. So now if I go to here, it striped it. Okay. You see that? And the witness is gone now. Interesting. Because again, they're actually, in this situation, they're actually using some of the components, has more than one vote here. But anyways, the big thing what I wanted to show you, yeah, this is the VMTK. What I really wanted to show you is now that it actually decided to make multiple components and stripe it, okay? So there are times when you don't specify striping in a policy and it will stripe it. This was an example. If it's 255 gigs or more, it makes a stripe. Another situation could be if you make a virtual disk that's too large to fit on a single physical disk, it's got to stripe it, okay? It's going to put a piece here and a piece there. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I've got another one coming up. A lot of this stuff is actually totally different. Actually, this is totally different. Maybe not totally different, but quite different on the express storage architecture, okay? I got a video coming up on that, so stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff changed with components and striping in the express storage architecture. But anyways, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please support the channel by subscribing to it. Without subscribing, there's no content, right, folks? And I do have super thanks enabled if you want to support the channel that way. Thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next one. Bye now.